good morning, actually 3 minutes into afternoon. Some of you may know who I am, some of you may not. My name is Sarah Ingram. I'm an actress and a director, and I wanted to talk to you today about how to create a character from scratch. So here's the thing. It's, oh, I've just gone to gallery view, didn't want to do that. Okay, cool. So here's the thing. Firstly, give me a wave if you have been in BYMT before or any other youth theatre. Who's been with BYMT? Give me a thumbs up on the chat, if you can. Anyone who's worked with BYMT or in fact any other youth theatre before? Anybody? Somebody? 2 participants raise their hands. Excellent, I have. Yes, me. Exie, excellent. Oh, hello, Lexi. I've got a piece. Why the Wales Cake, lovely. Yeah, my first project is this year. Excellent, nice to meet you, Neve. Okay, not yet, but I will this summer. Superb. Okay, cool. So quite a few if you have, some of you haven't. All right, I'm also doing a play at TOP. Excellent, good, right. So here's the thing, how to create a role from scratch. Now, there's sort of kind of 3 answers to this because there are 3 different ways us as actors are put into those situations. We either are going into a brand new production of a show that's been done before. So I don't know, Oklahoma or Carousel or anything like that, you know, well-known shows, or we're being asked to take over a role from an already existing running production. So we're stepping into somebody else's shoes, or you're creating a role with, for a brand new piece that's never been done before. So let's think about the difference between new work, brand new work, and recreated work. Let's not worry about the takeovers. So, for example, I have just played Mrs. Lovett in Sweeney Todd. Well, not just, before lockdown, clearly. I was playing the role. Now, this is a very, very famous role. Everybody knows Patti LuPone played it, Imelda Staunton played it, Angela Lansbury played it. But for me, what you have to do is remove those other actors. The only advice I can give you with this is do not look at another actor's version of a role. Because the clue's in the title here, chaps. We are playing parts. And the word part means it has to fit you. It has to slot into you. You can't produce a role in the same way that another person would because they're coming at it from a completely different angle and they have different experiences and they have different experience. So my advice would be never look at another person playing the role that you're doing because it's never going to fit your body. It's kind of like wearing a pair of shoes that don't fit. So the best way to do it is to go back to basics. All right, now the director will have a vision of how they want the production to look and feel for the audience, what they want it to look like. So very often certain productions will be put in a different era. Now, for example, easiest way for me to do it because it is such a famous role is to talk about Sweeney. Now, the Sweeney that I did was actually quite modern in its dress, in its look, even though the story is set in Victorian England. But for example, I was wearing, you know, leather trousers and a leather apron, and they cut all my hair off and bleached it all white, and she was quite funky. So there's a physicality that comes with that as well. But the bottom line is, for example, I was interviewed whilst doing Sweeney Todd by a newspaper, and the journalist asked me, and it was a public interview as well, I was in an audience, and the audience were all from the Stephen Sondheim Society, so, you know, guys who know what they're talking about. And I was asked if who I'd based my Mrs. Lovett on. Was it Angela Lansbury? Was it Patti LuPone? Was it Imelda Staunton? And my response was, no, it wasn't on any of them. And there was quite a sort of inhale of breath from the audience as if to go, who's this cocky woman? But I tried to explain to them that I wasn't talented enough to play Imelda Staunton playing Mrs. Lovett. I can only play Mrs. Lovett. And that's always something to keep in your mind, because otherwise it's too much pressure. If you're trying to go, oh, I liked that bit, I think I should play her that way because that person played it that way. But I did, however, do some research around her character. Now, with Lovett, for example, she's a psychopath, and it ends up helping someone kill people and turns them into meat pies. So this is not your normal person that you can get in touch with. But what is good is looking at the way that she thinks. So I don't know if anybody will know this, but there was a very notorious couple in the 1960s in this country, which was John Brady and Myra Hindley. And they, unfortunately, they were serial killers, and they kidnapped children and horrifically murdered them. Now, what I based my Lovett on her, on a real person, because whereas Brady was, from all the reports and everything that you read, was clearly a psychopath, as Sweeney is. I mean, although he has a reason, he's sort of working on revenge. But with Lovett, she is going along with it, the same as Myra Hindley went along with it, because she loved him. And there's a way that the human brain can say, there's nothing I'm doing that's wrong because I'm in love. It's coming out of love. Therefore, what I'm doing must be right. I am doing this because I love this man so much. I will facilitate whatever it is he needs me to facilitate. So she was actually my frame of reference, as opposed to somebody else, the way that they sing a song. It was going back, finding reality. And it doesn't matter how absurd a character you play or how ridiculous a character or totally out of the real world and imaginary you play, you can always and must always root it in some sort of reality. So the reality that I rooted Lovett in was the fact that she was desperate for love. She was desperate to have a husband and to have that so-called middle-class life that she was so hankering after, that she basically went down this nut job route in order to facilitate his revenge, in order to prove her love. But it's still rooted in basic kind of human behavior. It's still rooted in the fact that people do strange things for love. I mean, this was obviously the exceptionally strange thing for love, but it was a strange thing rooted out of love, basic human condition, being in love. So that was sort of where I started from. Now, the other thing to take into consideration when you're going into a new version of an old show, you must always understand to the best of your ability what your director's vision is, what your director wants the show to look like, what sort of era, what kind of image it has. Now, as I say, I was playing a Lovett in leather trousers and boots. She was very cool, very funky. And as was he. He was in like leather trousers and boots. And it was a very sort of modern day twist on it. The judge was in a normal three-piece suit, very expensive three-piece suit. So there wasn't that Victoriana to it. Now, I'd played the role before in that Victorian era, which therefore, when I moved into this new production, it's completely different. And that's the definition of how to create a character that has been done before. Even though I'd done it before, it felt completely different because we were in this sort of slightly modern day era. So obviously it makes you move differently. Always be aware of what the costume designs are, what the set design is. And the majority of the time, as soon as you start rehearsals for a show, you have what is called the set showing day. The first day you'll do a read through and you'll meet all the creatives and they will show you a miniature version of what the set's going to look like. That's your first clue. Because if you're looking at a set and you go, this is definitely Victorian, or this is definitely 1600s, or this is definitely 1980s, you kind of know the vibe. You have to go, all right, okay, we're going modern. I understand that. Then you look at the costume designs and go, I'm going to be sitting rather differently in a pair of leather trousers than I sat in a corset. So all of this informs how you develop the character. Now, the other thing is, and this is imperative as an actor, and I'm talking to you, actor to actor, as opposed to director to actor. It's also, when you're developing a character, the biggest part of our job is to listen, because you can't, unless you're doing a one-woman or a one-man show, you can't develop a character alone. And even if you are doing a one-man or a one-woman show, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be referring to people even if they're not present. So everybody's character in real life, let alone on stage, everybody's character in real life is formed by how other people view us. So if, for example, in a script, you can read on page 2 that someone says, this woman is an absolute nightmare. You've got to take that into consideration. Now, also, you need to look at what you think about that character as to whether or not it's you being the nightmare or it's them being the nightmare. But it's all about interaction between characters. So when you sit down and do a read through, because everybody's going to bring their own version and a part, as I said before, a part of themselves to every single character, that everything is going to sound new and fresh and exciting. So listen more than speaking. 90% of your energy has to go into hearing everybody else's character, because that will feed how you respond. That will feed how you develop your character. If you look at a person you're playing opposite, for example, my Sweeney, I had 2 different Sweeneys as well, which also changed how I played Lovett. My first Sweeney was a wonderful actor called David Bedella, 2-time Olivier Award winner, phenomenal. We'd known each other a long time, so that helped. We were friends, but he was a very charming, very charismatic Sweeney, and it sent Lovett in a completely different direction. Now, Stephen John Davis, who was, again, an amazing Sweeney that I did it with the last time, this most recent time, completely different, much more reserved, much more brooding, much harder towards Lovett, making her have to fight even more. So all of these elements that you get in a production, you cannot be an island. You have to be part of the whole process, and everybody's interaction with you, everybody's version of their own characters, of course, has to influence you. We all know what it's like if you're in a room full of people or at a birthday party and someone annoys you or somebody says something nasty. That influences how you behave. You react. A different part of your personality comes out. Well, if you hear a line given to you in a completely different way, you can't give the line back the same way as you would have done before. It's all logical, because all we're doing is trying to create real characters that exist in the world that the audience is seeing. So you have to work together. You have to work as a team. You have to work from the person who's back row of the chorus to the person who's playing the lead. None of us can work without each other, and that influences how you create a character. Hope that makes sense so far. Not too waffly. I do tend to go off on one, but I love doing this. I love my job, so I get sort of quite excited about it. Now, let's move on to brand new pieces. So I've just been up for I've just been auditioning online self-tape for a brand new show. Now you get a character breakdown. So the character breakdown was age between 40 and 50, which I was quite pleased about. It's quite nice, thank you. A little bit younger than I am. So that was a character breakdown. Mother, teacher, very confident in certain situations, not very confident in the relationship with her daughter. Okay, and that's all I got. That was it. Now, it was dealing with the subject of eating disorders. Now, there's your first clue. I'm looking at a script. It's clear it's modern day language, but that could pretty much set it any time in the last 50 years. Why, you ask? Because it was about 50 years ago, sort of the 70s, that eating disorders started to be discussed. It had never been acknowledged. It had never been given, either bulimia or anorexia or any of those hideous diseases had never been acknowledged or given a name. So you suddenly go, okay, I know where I am. I'm certainly within the last 50 years. Then there was a reference to an iPhone. Bingo. We're present day. We know we're present day. All of those clues are in there. Now, of course, our phrasing, the way that we speak, has to be attached to the era that we're working in. So you go, okay, I know how she talks now. That's fine. Educated? All right, she's a teacher. She's educated. South London. Okay, all right. So now we've got to put in maybe a bit of a South London accent. Got to start adding a little bit of that. But you're literally given 4 lines to try and find this character in an audition situation. So in an audition situation, what you have to do is give them a flavour, what you think from the information that you have, what it is you think that they're looking for. Now, the other thing with a brand new piece of work is, because I write as well, when I write a character and I pretty much think I know exactly how I want that character to be because I'm writing it, it's coming out of my noggin. But sometimes those characters are handed over to actors who will bring something else. Oh, that's interesting. I quite like that. So don't ever be afraid of being wrong, because there is no wrong. Even in rehearsals, even playing Love It, or playing Ado Annie, which I've done, or playing Miss Hannigan. My God, how many times has that role been done? I did Miss Hannigan as well. Those amazing roles that you have to bring something new to, because otherwise it won't fit. Never be afraid of being wrong, because there is no wrong. Everything about art is fluid. Everything about art is exploring. Everything about developing a character is exploring where you can take this person. It's like being on a journey in the East End of London, going down all these alleyways and going, oh, I quite like it over there. I'll have a look down there. No, that didn't work. I'll come back. Let's try somewhere else. It's called choices. There are choices to make. Some choices are better than others, but they're always choices. There's no right or wrong. No director who is ever worth any salt at all is ever going to say, no, I'm sorry, that's wrong. They're going to say, yeah, great. Can we maybe try it this way? Can we maybe try it that way? Because it's all about finding the choices that fit within the world that that director wants to take, that wants to create, that wants to take an audience, which always has to be part of the process, on a certain journey. And there is nothing better than a review that says, well, there's nothing better than a good review, let's be honest. But reviews aren't particularly relevant. But when you read something like, I loved this production, I've never seen it done this way before, bingo. Because every human being is different. Whether they are fictional or factual, every human being is different. Therefore, every version of every character is allowed to be different. It is allowed. Even if you copied someone word for word, it's still going to be different because it's you and not them. So never be afraid to be brave. Never be afraid to try and find something else, but always be aware of the vision of the entire piece of the world. Now, I don't know if any of you were on the last webinar I did, which was basically talking about pretty much everything I've ever done. I'm not sure how I managed to get that in an hour, but it's 1 second, please. I apologize. Now, would you believe it? That's my agent calling. She'll have to wait. It's good if I put it on silent. So by working and talking about everything that I've ever done, I also touched on this. There is we all know, for example, when you leave the house in the morning and you walk out the door and you know your neighbour's car, it's always there. You know the plants that you walk past on your pathway, or the lift that you go in to get out of your flat, or everything is familiar. Everything is familiar. Therefore, you can exist in the world comfortable that you know who you are because you know everything around you. It's second nature. You know, I know behind me that I haven't washed up a frying pan from this morning. I know that. You don't, well, you do now, but I know that it's there. I know everything in this apartment because it's my apartment, it's my world. I know what's outside my window. I know where the shops are. I know it, I understand it. It's second nature. Don't even think about it. Therefore, Sarah exists in that world and can deal with any stories or any drama that comes up. When we're putting together a character, it's pretty much the same thing. In order to be confident and relaxed with a character, you kind of got to know the world. You've got to know the world that you're living in, that character exists in. You have to know how their house is decorated, what their background, what happened yesterday before the curtain went up. It gives you a grounding. Otherwise, you've got no foundation, really. If you don't know that when you walk out of the front door that's at the back of the set, what it is that's there, you're never going to look comfortable walking out of the front door. If that makes sense. To me, it makes perfect sense. I hope it does to you. It's about understanding the world and the era. There is a certain way of speaking in the 1930s, which is no longer relevant. There is a certain way of dressing. There is a certain way of walking. There is a certain way of sitting. Going back to what I was saying about Love It. Now, bearing in mind it was set modern day, and the last time I did it was set 150 years ago. I sat in a completely different way. I'm not going to sit in the same way in a pair of leather pants that I do in a corset. Therefore, I'm not going to behave in the same way. I'm not going to move in the same way. The world, that kind of world, Victorian England, in the slums of the East End, was stinky and horrible. People were throwing their toilet out of the window. It was poor. It was, there was so much poverty. There was so much disease. There was it was a much shorter life expectancy. Now, how do you think that impacts on a character of a certain age who is desperate to fall in love and to be married? Now, in modern day, I've got another 30 years ahead of me. But when you play that role in Victorian England, I got 10 years to get this right. 10 years at most. With all of this poverty and all of this disease, I don't know how much longer I've got. There's much more of a desperation to get married just by setting the same story in a different era. That's how important it is. It adds a different flavor to the character, knowing that there's a real time limit on this. It's not like she's thinking, well, if this one doesn't work out with Sweeney, I'll try someone else. There's a desperation to it if you think I've only got 10 years left. So suddenly you take the character in a completely different direction because there's that, please, 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 this is my last chance. Whereas playing it again in a completely different era, you had to bring in a different element. It was an obsessive love. It was a fixated love, but it wasn't influenced by the fact that I thought I was running out of time. It's those little details that bring a character to its absolute fulfillment. And there are certain things with that. The audience doesn't need to know that you as an actor have done all that research. But I always say, if you haven't done it, we know there's something missing. Won't be able to put our finger on it, but we'll know there's something missing because you're missing that weight. You're missing that knowledge, that history, that comfort in your own surroundings. Whereas if it is there, audience, from the moment the curtain goes up, sort of sits back and goes, they know what they're doing. I'm relaxed. I can just enjoy the story. Does that make sense? I hope it does. Feel free, if you want to, ask me any questions you like. I probably won't get to all of them. But if you have a question, chuck out a question as to how to do it. Style of speech as well, that's another one. Knowing how somebody speaks, how it's written and how it needs to sound. If you've got someone from the East End, it's going to affect the way that you are. Do you know what I mean? The way if you're stuck in EastEnders, it's going to be completely different to doing a Chekhov playing Olga in Chekhov in beautiful corsets and beautiful costumes. All of those elements add, and then you can start looking at the script. Then you can start looking at the script and understanding the story. If the world is solid, if the world you're inhabiting is known and understood, the story will always take care of itself. Because life takes care of itself. We all deal with dramas on a day-to-day basis. It's no different in theatre. The curtain just happens to go up on the moment when this particular story begins. You could do a whole play about what's happened to these people before, what's got them to that place, what made Hannigan drunk, what made Ado Annie flirty, what happened to her mother, why is she always flirting, why is she always slightly dumb, which of course she is. The script then becomes your playground. I've got a question. I don't know if this makes sense, but this is from Mary. I don't know if this makes sense, but is it better to know what your character is doing and everything about them so you can act them, or to try and actually get your brain to be that character? Okay. Got it. I assume you all heard that. Mary, is it better to know your character, what your character is doing and everything about them so you can act them, or try and actually get your brain to be that character? Okay, there's a halfway point here. Halfway point. If you... Acting is to the point... You have to know the answers to the questions. But if your brain is working and thinking in between the lines of, like the character does, you don't have time to act. You need to fill your mind with all of this information so that you play the role. For example, opening line, here's the easiest thing to do. Wait, what's your rush, what's your hurry? You gave me such a fright, I thought you was a ghost. Right, so first 2 singing lines, first entrance of Love It. She's saying to Sweeney Todd, wait, what's your rush, what's your hurry? Hold on a minute, I need a customer. I need to make money in my pie shop. I thought you was a ghost. She recognizes him. So you're thinking, I thought you was a ghost. I know you, while still moving at 100 miles an hour through the script, but those thoughts have to go on. So you have to have your subtext, your own thoughts, your own imaginings, those own questions that go on in your head while you're listening or watching or speaking to somebody else. That's normal. You're all looking at me now, and some of you might be going, yeah, she's all right. Others might be going, I don't quite get what she's saying. But you will always keep hold of yourself. Anybody who says acting is easy is an idiot. You have to think ostensibly on 3 different levels. You are speaking the line, you are thinking the thoughts, the subtext thoughts of the character, but you are also aware yourself and thinking technically, thinking, hold on a minute, I'm slightly out of my light here, whilst doing the subtext, whilst saying the lines. So you're thinking on 3 levels always. And then we start talking about singing as opposed to speaking, if you're doing a musical, and movements, and props. I mean, I was making a pie whilst doing all this. You are literally on so many different levels. The other thing is, Mary, you can be a character as opposed to acting a character. No one ever wants to act. Act is, if you think of acting, it's something that you put on yourself. As great actors, it comes from the inside out. However, you can never lose yourself completely, because that's insanity. You can't do that. You can't literally become another person and lose yourself, because then that's not acting, that's not the craft. That is insanity, because you're becoming someone else completely. They make movies about that. I don't know if that makes sense. It's about working on many, many levels at the same time, but committing to the ones that the audience see with every ounce of your being. I hope that makes sense. Next question. What are the main questions you ask yourself as the character to know them well enough? There's sort of 4 or 5 questions I ask, Grace. What do people say about me in the story? What do I say about other people? What do I say about myself publicly? And what do I think about myself privately? Those are the 4 questions where the script will help you. And then what you need to do is sit down each time you do something outrageous, or your character does something outrageous, like, for example, suggest that we put humans into meat pies and sell them, which happens in Sweeney. When you're rehearsing that kind of thing, you have to sit there and go, why is she going this far? Why? Have we tipped over the edge? And of course, it's about controlling Sweeney. It's about making herself absolutely imperative to the rest of his life. He can't continue without her, because now she knows what he's doing. Now she's aiding and abetting him. They are inextricably linked. She's got him. She loves him. Her life is complete. All by saying, why don't we put a human being into a meat pie? She's got it. He cannot leave her now. She knows too much and she's helping. So those are the kinds of questions I ask myself at every moment throughout the script. I'm hopefully going to be playing The Artful Dodger in October. Great. Up to now, I've been taking inspiration from Jack Wilde because I think that suits the character. Is it okay to take inspiration from another actor if it feels right when you play it? It is great to take inspiration, absolutely. Be inspired by other performers. But also, as far as Dodger is concerned, be inspired by the era, what it is. Look at this kid, why he's a kid who appears to be an adult. There's a reason why. And it's because of the world that he lives in. He's absolutely self-sufficient. He basically goes out to work every day, even though he's stealing. He goes out to work every day. He is second in command to Fagin. He runs the boys. He's the one in charge. He's a small adult. And as much as it's all wonderful the other people's productions of it, and it is Oliver, and it's great fun, and he's very funny, and he's very witty. Never forget that he also has a history. That he also had the moment when he was recruited to go into Fagin's gang. He wasn't always number one. So start thinking about the experiences he had to become number one, what he went through, the fact that he recognizes in Oliver that there is, that he's frightened, that he needs turning, and that your life can be better, mate, once you become an adult. I'm an adult. I'm small, but I'm effective. All of that, all of those questions, ask yourself. Think about how he got to where he got, because it doesn't just start when the curtain goes up. It doesn't start. Dodger didn't come into being the moment he meets Oliver. He's got all that history with Nancy, with Bet, with Fagin, with Sykes. He has that history. Does he aspire to be Sykes? Does he aspire to be Fagin? Does he have compassion? You know, does he want to look after Oliver? All of those questions, none of which you can answer. Jack Wilde probably answered all of those questions himself. But if you ask yourself those questions, the part will become yours, if that makes sense. Dottie here. Hello, Dottie. How can you make yourself accessible to a range of characters and roles rather than being selected due to superficial looks or personality? Don't accept being put in a box. Never limit yourself to only going for the roles that you think other people think you should play. So if somebody comes to you and says, I think you should play, you know, the pretty girl over there, say, that's great. Can I please audition for the funny one over there? Because that's the thing. It's very easy with casting to be cast on the way that you look. But if you want to be a character actor, you need to adapt. You need to be able to morph and change. So what it means is keep your eye on the ball. I always remember where it is you want to end up. And if you're being given those certain kinds of roles now, absolutely, take them. Take the ones that they think you're perfectly right for. As long as you've learnt enough along the way and watched enough along the way and observed how these wonderful characters have come to life, so that you know that when those days of how you look at the moment are gone, you can move on because you have honed your craft. It's about being a chameleon. It's about widening your own skill set. Never stop watching and learning. All of those wonderful performances in film and in theatre and television, watch them and go, do you know, I'd love to be able to do that. So watch, pick it apart, understand, try and understand their process so that you can learn from their process and then make it your own. So you will only be pigeonholed if you allow people to pigeonhole you. I've never been pigeonholed, but then I was never young and gorgeous. I was always slightly quirky and reasonably amusing. So I was always going to be a character actress. But I mean, I have friends whose careers have gone now because they relied on the fact of how they looked. And of course, we're all cracking on now. So make yourself invaluable. Widen your skill set always, and then they can't pigeonhole you. Hope that helps. When you're doing a role that's already been done, would it be better for you to come up with all your own ideas for that character, or is it okay to take a little inspiration from lots of other characters and mix that inspiration with some of your own thoughts? Hope that makes sense. Neve. Thank you, Mary. It does make sense. Good. That's good. Well, I think sort of what I've said before, because no human being is not without influence of others. We are all influenced. We're influenced by our parents. We're influenced by our teachers. We're influenced by our directors, our choreographers, our other actors, our friends, by fashion, by social media. We are all influenced. So there's no reason to not create a character and acknowledge that we're influenced. There's nothing wrong with taking influence from lots of different places. As I said, I I tend not to watch anybody else playing the role that I'm about to play, just because it sort of gets in the way. But I am happy to take influences from lots of other politicians or serial killers or other drunks, or I played a lot of drunks. This isn't for my free time, just so you know. Or those who are slightly dodgy. I've done a lot of work around the Holocaust, and the story. I've done one true story. I did the Diary of Anne Frank, and of course there's an awful lot of research there. And I read all about the other characters and not about Mrs. Van Dam, which I was playing Peter's mother. And then I did a musical set in the Holocaust, and it was set in the Warsaw Ghetto. So what I did was read all about the real people that lived in the Warsaw Ghetto and learnt about the Warsaw Ghetto, so that I could walk around it in my head and the world was real. And then I played the character, influenced by all of the knowledge that I had. Knowledge is power. The more you know, the better it is. So take any influence you possibly can. I think my point is, be aware and be careful of only ever committing to another actor's version of it. You know, bring your own ideas. Don't undersell your own ability by copying someone else's. Bring all of those influences, those real life influences in. Those many other performances, if that's the way you want to go, but don't fixate on one and try and do a copy, because actually what you're doing is, well, you're shortchanging yourself, because you're never going to explode. You're never going to develop fully, if that makes sense. I hope that's good. Do you have any tips to help stay in character when you're nervous? Yes, I do. What I've been talking about, which I've given you a huge amount to think about, but the more you have to think about, the less nervous you are. The more you inhabit the world and commit to the world, and keep all of those thoughts, those backstories, that subtext, that all of the research that you've done, that world that you've created in your head, you've got so much to think about, you ain't got time to be nervous. And it means that the nerves are the right kinds of nerves. Now, I'm not saying I don't get nervous. Trust me, I get nervous. I spend the majority of the half, from like 5 to 7 to 7:30 on an opening night, in the toilet. That's why I always get ready early. Too much information? But the moment I go on, my brain kicks in and the character kicks in. And you'll come off and go, that could be better. But then you have a wonderful long run and you get it better, and it gets stronger and stronger and stronger, and it comes more second nature, and you start going, that bit worked, that's clocked, ticked. I'll keep that for tomorrow night, and we'll keep going and we'll keep growing and we'll keep growing, because it never stops. It's not like, oh, I've nailed it, that's all I have to do. The characters keep developing, and you'll keep finding stuff, and you'll keep seeing moments, and you'll suddenly understand a line in a way that you never have before, because it's responded to a line that an actor's given you and they've never said it like that before, and suddenly everything explodes and it's all exciting again. So it's an ongoing thing. So staying in character when you're nervous is the best way to do it, is to focus on the character, focus on the world that you've created, all of those subtexts, and keep your own censoring, because we've all been in the position where we've hit a note or said a line and something in our head has gone, that was rubbish. Shut up, at which point you're already on to the next line. We've all done that. We censor ourselves, and trust me, that never goes away. But it's about trusting that you've done the work. It's all about the preparation. It's all about rehearsals. It's all about exploring, and the rest is adrenaline. So just give yourself so much to focus on, rather than just standing on stage and go, I've got to sing a song now. What is that song? What are you saying? What's going on? What's happening in the lines? What's happening in your head while the lines are being sung? You've got so much to damn well think about. Who's got time for nerves? That's how I work it, if that helps. Is it a good idea, Neve, is it a good idea to add a little of your own personality into your character? For example, I'm getting the opportunity to play Scaramouche in We Will Rock You in March. Excellent, congratulations. And although I can't relate to her gothiness and defensiveness, but I can relate to her underlying insecurity, etc. So I tend to bring out that a bit more than I've seen other actresses bring out in her, because it just naturally relates to that vulnerable side in her. Is this a good thing to do with characters that have relatable aspects to them? I don't think you need to overthink it. I think it's enough to go, yeah, I get that, as opposed to, I need to punch this through. All it means to me is that there is a certain section of Scaramouche that is your part, clicks into you. Don't overthink it. I mean, I've played, you always have to relate to a character. You always have to understand somehow, even if you're playing a psychopath or a murderer, if you're doing Lady M in Macbeth, you have to love her. I played a really nasty character in a show a few years ago, like really annoying, but I had to believe that what she was doing, she thought she was doing for the right reasons. So I could relate to that, her commitment. I didn't relate to her behavior, but I related to her commitment. And that is one of the things that will bring you in. So yes, absolutely acknowledge if there is a certain character trait that you relate to, but don't actively push it and ignore the ones that you don't. That's slightly dangerous. All you need to do is go, I should absolutely be playing this. I kind of get that part of her. Let's explore the other bits, as opposed to pushing and letting it push the other bits out. If that makes sense, Neve, I hope it does. I've got some on, they're the Q&A ones coming in. As a director, when rehearsing a song from an acting perspective, how do you bridge the gap so that when you bring the music in, the actors are still able to translate all the acting work into their singing? Yeah, okay. Who's this from? Lexi. It's not actually a directing question. I mean, it is a directing question, but it's a universal question. I mean, a lot of people seem to think that there is this terrible myth with musical theatre that I can't go and see a musical because they just like burst into song for no reason, which is rubbish. They only do that if it's done badly. Transitioning from text to song, the reason musicals happened, because they're actually quite a recent thing. It's less than 100 years old, a musical. We had operas and we had plays and we had variety, but we didn't have a book musical until the first one, really, 1928, Showboat. And then went on, and the big one was Oklahoma, and then Carousel and South Pacific, and Rodgers and Hammerstein were the ones who created the book musical, where people carried on the story through the song. And their thinking was the moment that the song comes in, the moment that the music enters and the character starts singing, is because words are no longer enough. So they put their music in at the sort of most emotional moments, or the most poignant moments, or in order to move the story along. But it was just a way of heightening the point, making the point stronger by adding music. That was their thinking. That seems to have been slightly forgotten as musicals have gone on. So I always look at a song like a monologue, always, because I do straight theatre and Shakespeare and musical theatre. I don't look at, my process isn't any different for any of them. A character is a character. A journey is a journey, and storytelling is storytelling, whether I'm doing it in Shakespearean verse or prose, whether I'm doing it a restoration comedy from the 1600s, whether I'm doing a full-blown modern musical like something like Flashdance that I did, or or working on a sort of straight modern play. There's no difference in the process of how I attack the dialogue or the text, whether it is set to music or in the scene beforehand or afterwards. It is all text. It is all part of the story. So I always attack a song as if it was text. There's no difference for me. No difference to my process. The only thing is, one would hope one is doing it in tune. But that's all it is. I was asked once at an audition if I was an actress or a singer, if I was an actor or a singer, by actually a big sort of movie composer called Hans Zimmerman. He writes an awful lot of movie soundtracks, like Gladiator and all of that. And he'd written a musical that I was being cast for to do a recording of, to do a studio recording of. And I went in and I was working with them, and they handed me this music, which I had to sight sing. And I did it. I didn't know it was him. I didn't know it was Hans Zimmerman because I didn't know what he looked like. I knew who he was, but I didn't know what he looked like, so I didn't know it was him. And afterwards he went, so tell me, would you consider yourself an actress or a singer? And I went, I'm sorry, I don't understand the question. He said, would you consider yourself first and foremost an actress or first and foremost a singer? I said, there's no difference. I don't understand. Just because I can do it in tune doesn't mean to say I'm not doing it. So I got the job, ironically. I think he liked the answer because it's true. It is true. And anyone who seems to think it isn't is usually someone who has some perverted idea of musical theatre. There is no difference. So as long as you learn your song as a monologue and never forget all of those techniques that I've been talking about when creating a character and sorting out your backstory and your inner thoughts, none of that stops when you start singing. You know when it does. If an actor is not very good in a musical and is just there to be a voice and isn't a very good actor, they're never going to be a very good singer. We're just doing the same in tune. So keep the thoughts going. If there's a huge introduction between the end of your dialogue and when you start singing, fill that introduction with the thoughts that lead you into your first line. So you never drop the ball, although good stuff brings in the introduction whilst you're finishing the dialogue so you can go straight in. So there would in fact be no change. So it's, as a director, that's how I would instruct an actor. As an actor, that's how I do it. I don't treat songs any differently than I do to a huge blooming monologue in Shakespeare or a soliloquy. There is no difference. And as long as you know that, there will never be that clunky moment between having a good old line and going into a song. There's no difference. So I hope that answers the question. I've got time for one more. One part I dream to play someday is Zoe in Dear Evan Hansen, but when they cast it, I've heard that they tried to keep it to be played the same as the previous person. I've been told I have the look, but I don't know if I would do my own take on it or try to do it the same as the previous Zoes. I hope that makes sense. It does make sense. It's sort of what I was talking about earlier. It's the third version when you're taking over a role. When you're taking over a role, there is a lot less freedom. I've only done a takeover once. I've done what, 110, 15 productions. Been very, very lucky. I've only ever taken over a role once. I've only ever been original cast or original cast in a new production or original cast with a brand new piece. So I've been very, very lucky. I've only ever done it from scratch, but I have done it once. There will be, as I said before, they can say, if you look like her, but you're still not her. So they will direct you and you'll have to hit a certain mark and you'll pick up a prop on a certain beat and all of that. There is that restriction to it because somebody else has created the role. Someone else has done the creation bit that we've been talking about that I've been lucky enough to do. But you, if you take over a role, You're slightly restricted. You have to have the costumes. You can't have a conversation with the costume designer and go, kind of see this person this way, maybe can we add that? Or can I have this? You're restricted with the freedom because you're taking on an already developed character in a way that they like it. However, don't let this put you off, because we are all individual. Every human being on this planet is individual. So you are still going to be individual. It is a different skill because you are literally having to recreate something. Because I am so creative by nature, it's never been the real route that I've gone down. But if you do it, I have done it and it was fine. I took over the role of Paulette in Legally Blonde, but it was a director that I had worked with before who just went, yeah, just play it your way, it's fine. So I got off lightly. But it's a skill and it is a discipline. And it's, if you go into any already up and running show, it's a discipline you have to learn. That is, yes, this is what I do, this is how I do it. So what you do is you learn the moves and then you put it into your bones, as opposed to it being into your bones to then learn the moves. It happens the other way around. But you will be directed. When you audition for something, you will be directed by the director. They will help you. They will tell you what it is that they want. So it's learning to take direction and understanding what it is. Again, going back to what I was saying, even when you're creating a character, it's understanding the director's vision. And the director at this point has huge visions about the character as well. So you have to hand over your talent to somebody and go, what is it you want me to do with this? As opposed to the other way around, which is, this is what I can do with it. Do you want it? But it's all the same process, and it is an incredibly useful skill. I haven't honed it because I haven't had to do it, because I've only ever done original cast, as I say. But it's a very different side to the business. But don't worry about it. If you're right, you're right. It's about, again, play the role. Nobody wants you to be a carbon copy. And no one is going to balk either if you go into play the role. Don't play the person who played the role before. It's the same, it's all the same discipline. From everything that we've been talking about, it's all the same discipline. So don't go in and go, I need to be so-and-so. It's exactly the same answer, actually. You need to be Zoe. You need to be Zoe. And they can't argue with that if you're committed to the character. And if they think you're taking it in the wrong direction, they'll sure as hell tell you. But because it's a partnership, you have to trust your director and their vision. So you go, oh, okay, you want me to take it in that direction? Okay, I'm open to that, and you do it. You can't have rigid ideas. Everything, as I said like 3 hours ago when we started this, everything in art is fluid. So bring what you bring to the role when you audition for it. Be aware of how that role has been created. So look at that role when you're doing a takeover as a real person to study the role, not the actress, but take note in how that role is played when you're thinking of going for a takeover. Does that make sense? I hope it does. Thank you all. It's been lovely to almost meet you, if only in typing. And I wish you all the luck in the world. No matter what happens in this industry, they can't stop our brains, our imagination, our passion, and our love for art. We're always going to be here. So enjoy that. Take it forward. Have a great Saturday. And I hopefully will meet you all in person soon. Take care. Lots and lots of love.